You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, nutrition, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere, anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your hosts, Dr. Justin Marchegiani and Barris Harvey, as they answer your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, this is Dr. Justin Marchegiani, and welcome to another awesome episode of Beyond Wellness Radio. Again, we have a great show in store for you. Before, go to beyondwellnessradio.com. Click on the newsletter sign-up button. You can sign up for our newsletter and get show updates right in your inbox before anyone else. You can also click on the questions button and even speak questions live, and we'll be able to answer it on the air for you. You can also click on the write a review button. If you really enjoy the show, write us a review. Let us know on iTunes. Let the world know. Think of one person that would benefit from listening to this show and share it with them. Sharing is caring. Also, check out justinhealth.com, which is my personal site. Again, I have some complimentary functional medicine consults available. You can also sign up for the free thyroid series and female hormone series as well. You can also go to reallyhealthynow.com. That's Barris Harvey's website, where he has some great articles and blogs and videos for you there as well, and even some consultations. Again, we have an awesome show in store. Stay tuned. Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome back to Beyond Wellness Radio. Today we have an awesome guest, Dr. Tim Jackson. We're super excited to have him come in. He was just on the Bulletproof Radio podcast a few months back, and he talked about MTHFR and some heavy metal detoxification stuff, and I'm really interested to bring some of this information to our listeners. So, Dr. Tim, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Dr. Marchegiani?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good. Really excited to get you on. I know we've been playing email or Facebook tag for the last few months, but I'm really stoked to get you on today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And now I know you're a DPT, which is a doctor of physical therapy, and it's kind of similar to me. I'm a doctor of chiropractic, and both of these, fields kind of emanated more from the structural side of things, and we both have taken a lot of time over the last years to decade to really study functional medicine. And I'm just curious, kind of your background, how you came into functional medicine and became an expert in your field through the PT world.
Yeah, basically I went to undergraduate at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Very tough academic school, and I was pre-med. I took all the classes required for a traditional allopathic medical school. Did very well academically, but got into working out and eating healthier and into nutrition while I was there. And, I did some preceptorships at the medical school at Bowman Gray Medical School in Wake Forest. And, most of the doctors said, if you're interested in the nutrition and prevention aspect, you may want to consider another route. But I still had plans to go and get my MD and just kind of do my own thing. My senior year, I had a major jaw surgery on top of having mono, and my health went downhill quickly. I had a huge candida infection, which, back then, today, candida is all the rage, but back then, not many people were talking about it. And so, I went untreated with that for about 2.5 to 3 years. Extreme fatigue, heavy metal toxicity, gut issues, malabsorption, brain fog, all those sorts of things. And it basically emanated from that surgery that I had.
Wow. And
hindsight, being 2020, I probably had Lyme, since I was a child growing up in the country in South Carolina.
Yeah.
But after that trauma of the surgery, which I was under anesthesia for 8 hours, which was much longer than it should have been, that probably was enough of a trigger for the Lyme to be opportunistic and to take over my body. So then, eventually about 2.5 years later, I found an integrative ear, nose, and throat doctor who treated me for candida with probiotics and some just basic supplements that we basically all take now. And I knew I wanted to get a doctorate, but at that point I knew enough about functional medicine that I knew I would have a hard time sitting through an allopathic 4-year medical school and learning that information, knowing that a lot of it simply wasn't true.
Yeah, and not even that, also a 3-year residency on top of that.
Yeah, and I'd spoken with a friend who was actually a DC and an MD, and he said, when he was in residency, he would prescribe supplements, and, they would slap him on the wrist for it. So I decided not to go that route, and I originally took about 9 psychology courses. I was going to get a PhD in psychology and be a sports psychologist. But then I decided that I really liked the hands-on part, and since I'd already spent a lot of money on undergrad, I wanted to stay close to home for my doctorate program, and I went to the Medical University of South Carolina. So the Doctor of Physical Therapy program was 9 semesters, gross anatomy, biochemistry, physiology, nutrition, all those things. And I knew all along I was planning on incorporating nutrition, dietary supplements, and some lab testing into what I was doing. But, I guess every field has a trailblazer, and I said, well, why not me? Because there's not many DPTs. There are a few, but not many doing what I do. But what I found is that a lot of times external musculoskeletal issues are simply internal manifestations of internal problems, or external manifestations of internal problems. So whether it's a leaky gut, dysbiosis, chronic low-grade infections and inflammation, hormonal levels, adrenal glands, pregnenolone levels, all of those play a role in your pain, your perception of pain, and your ability to control inflammation.
Yes.
So if you have pain, by definition, you have inflammation. So, we want to look at your hormones and see whether you're in a net anabolic state or a reparative state or a net catabolic state where you're breaking down tissue. And so that's what I noticed is coming out of my doctorate program, I worked at a sports performance facility, and, I would have people, for example, with frozen shoulder, and I would find out, they had low thyroid, which is kind of a common one for a frozen shoulder. And I would have people with, low back pain that would get better when their pregnenolone was optimized. So I started saying, of course the manual therapy is needed to some degree, but you'll need a lot less of it and less often if you optimize some of the internal factors.
Right, and I think, I've done some active release therapy techniques in my clinic here, some of my imbalanced chiropractic patients, and I noticed that you're an ART certified doc as well. And ART a lot of times can speed up the need to even having to do traditional physical therapy, because a lot of times those muscles can be shut down because one of the excess inflammation from the diet and the adrenal glands being shot, but also because of all these adhesions and trigger points that are in that muscle belly. Can you talk more about the ART part?
Yeah, so active release technique, I hear a lot of times, it's just massage therapy, but it's not massage therapy.
No.
Dr. Leahy developed it, and he basically, it's about creating tension and allowing the different muscular layers to be able to glide relative to one another. So, the source of symptoms, let's say you have shoulder pain. Well, that could be coming from the wrist, some of the muscles in the wrist. So they really teach you how to look at the kinetic chain and go over some of the common problems and teach you, the 3 or 4 techniques that are best for problem X or problem Y. And the ART, what I tell people is that X-rays and MRIs show macro trauma. If you have a ligament or a meniscal tear or something, it's going to show that. But it doesn't show us, like even if we look at an X-ray of your spine, how the vertebrae got there. So obviously muscles attached to the bones, and if we don't address the muscular imbalances and asymmetries from side to side, you're creating torsion, and your discs don't like torsion very much. And so, the ART really worked on the microscopic level of trigger points and creating the gliding of the muscles relative to one another, and allowed the stabilizing muscles to become more active versus just looking at, this is a shoulder problem, let's, mobilize the humerus. Well, you have to look at what attaches to the humerus.
Right, exactly. That makes so much sense. And I know you doing the physical stuff for so long, you made the connection with the adrenal fatigue, the pregnenolone, all of these things. These people, even with these work, the soft tissue work or the ART or the PT, they just healed so much faster when you add in the other stuff, right?
Yeah, I would have someone who came in with frozen shoulder, and 2, maybe 3 sessions at the most, they would be healed. and traditional physical therapy would keep them 3 times a week for 3 months.
Right.
So, I found that a lot of DPTs, they just fail to put together the basic biomechanics, and they stop and they don't stop and look at what factors are affecting this joint.
Right.
Or, they have if you have low back pain, let's focus on your low back. But the first thing I look at when I have low back pain is I look at hip internal rotation and extension. I look at lat stiffness, since that can hyperextend the lumbar spine. And I look at thoracic spine mobility. So, you got to always look at the joints above and below. I think that escapes people a lot, since you can have a top-down approach where, if you have a protracted chin, that can affect your kinetic chain from there down below. Or if you have an overpronation or oversupination, that can affect everything up to the low back and even the neck.
Exactly. Well, I like the holistic approach at looking at the whole kinetic chain in the body. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, a common scenario I would see would be, people with knee pain, and, the physical therapist or chiropractor wasn't really looking at the knee as just the other end of the femur. So, I would have people with knee pain working on glutes because that attaches to the other end of the femur. And so, I think you have to almost, if you're going to do functional medicine or physical medicine, look at the kinetic chain as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. And I do a lot of applied kinesiology muscle testing, where we'll test the different muscles and how they're functioning neurologically by resisting force, by resisting a manual muscle test. And we'll see things just like eating gluten can shut down someone's glutes. Right. And you see that often, and then, hey, they have back pain or knee pain, and then, hey, is that really caused by gluten potentially shutting down the kinetic chain?
Right. Yeah, and I hear all the time, people say, oh, well, ART, there's no double-blind studies. Well, guess what? Every NFL team has an ART practitioner. That should tell you everything right there, because you're looking at an organization who's not resource-constrained, and they're picking someone who's ART certified to be on the sidelines or travel with the team every game, because their players benefit from it. And if the team doesn't have one, the players seek out one because they notice the difference. A lot of people will combine the ART with Graston, which is a little more aggressive, or Gua Sha, or some of those other sound-assisted instrument techniques. But yeah, I mean, any sort of inflammation, can contribute to musculoskeletal pain. And I know Dr. Alex Vasquez, he talks a lot about, circulating immune complexes, where you have an antigen, whether it's, pollen or a virus, attached to an antibody like an IgM or IgG, and they circulate throughout the body. It could deposit in the joints or in the muscles, and that can be a common cause of musculoskeletal referred pain.
Exactly, I agree, and it's interesting because when you follow the money trail, unless you have a $100 million or a multi-billion-dollar industry behind something, it's hard to find a whole bunch of studies. It really is. It really is difficult, and that's why you have to look at clinical application. Where, hey, what's happening with your other colleagues? What are you doing? What's working? And then spreading the word that way, because you're just not going to find studies that tell you taking vitamin C at this dose is good, or certain techniques. I mean, it's nice to have that, but it's tough because these studies cost a lot of money, and if you don't have a patentable product to then sell afterwards, anyone can sell it, and there's a lot of competition on the open market.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and a lot of people just, forget that hormones, gut health, everything that happens internally can refer externally. And I even see that happen in the integrative functional medicine world a lot of times. Oh, okay, you have gut issues, here, take some digestive enzymes. Well, digestive enzymes may not be their deficiency. It could be lactobacillus deficiency. It could be a stomach acid deficiency. It could be SIBO. Any of those things. SIBO is a common cause of musculoskeletal pain as well. And, all those things affect the mitochondria, which are the batteries of our cells. And if you affect the mitochondria, you basically affect every system of the body. So I think, if you're going to do physical medicine and try to rehab someone and get over aches and pains, you need to look internally just as much as you do externally.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you mentioned the mitochondria, and just for all the listeners at home, that's the powerhouse of your cell that really generate a lot of energy. And the mitochondria loves burning fat. So can you talk about just, some simple things or tips or tools or supplements that you use to help enhance your patient's mitochondria?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing I do is actually, the common thing to do if you Google the internet or talk to someone on the street, they're going to say, take coenzyme Q10, take carnitine.
Right.
And those can be very helpful. Mm-hmm. But what I want to look at first is what is damaging the mitochondria, because they're so susceptible to oxidative stress. I'm going to get a drink of water here real quick.
Yeah, no worries.
So they're so susceptible to oxidative stress, we want to make sure that person's glutathione levels and their superoxide dismutase levels are optimal, because those two enzymes, they sit in front of the mitochondrial membrane, and if there's a free radical coming or oxidative stress coming, they take the bullet for it. Have a deficiency in glutathione, and a lot of people do, or the superoxide dismutase enzyme, the mitochondria are sitting there like sitting ducks, and so you can have oxidative stress from blood sugar imbalances. You can have oxidative stress from heavy metals. You can have oxidative stress from infections, and that's actually called a microbial mitochondriopathy, meaning there's a microbe causing the mitochondria to become pathogenic. And so the first thing I look to is trying to raise the levels of those enzymes, which you can do with certain transdermal creams, certain liposomal forms orally, because I want to protect the mitochondria from any damage that's going on. Then I want to look downstream and see what causes or creating inflammation. It could be a latent viral infection, could be a stealth bacteria like mycoplasma, it could be aluminum, mercury, lead. All those can contribute. So we want to make sure that we get those enzyme levels up, that we get out the bad stuff, the metals, heavy and toxic metals, and that we provide, then we can go in and provide the substrates like carnitine and CoQ10, which, you can supplement with those, but they're typically made through a process called methylation, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. But methylation helps you, if you optimize it, helps you produce more carnitine and CoQ10. And so, instead of having to supplement, you may be able to improve your body's own function. So that's one way or a couple ways of approaching improving mitochondrial function. A second major way is basically, I call it mitochondrial rehabilitation, cell membrane. And so it's, you've probably heard of the supplements NP Factor Energy, that contain a lot of phospholipids. Most people know that we have cell membranes, but the mitochondria actually have their own inner and outer membrane. And the phospholipids, they've been shown in studies, after 6 weeks, there's been a reduction in fatigue by about 40%. In people with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, myalgia, encephalomyelitis, all of those types of disorders.
And that's like taking those different supplement supports. Is that what you just mentioned?
What's that?
And so you said they had an improvement in the energy in a lot of these different conditions. And what were the key nutrients in the supports?
It was the NT specifically. This study I'm referencing is on the NT Factor Energy products. There's a few companies that make them. Research Nutritionals is one. Allergy Research Group is another. And you take them, you do a loading phase for the first month. It's basically 3 capsules 3 times a day with food. And then after that, it's 1 capsule 3 times a day with food. And that helps to improve the membrane health. So if you can combine that along with the glutathione, which you need to raise for many other reasons, and the superoxide dismutase, your mitochondria are going to be rocking and rolling. A lot of your listeners have probably, and readers have probably heard of PQQ.
Yeah.
That's another supplement that provides reducing agents, basically, to the mitochondria to help produce more ATP. NAD plus is another supplement. It's not commonly sold out there, but it is out there.
And when you say a reducing agent, you're just meaning these products are allowing to add in electrons to this whole entire energy process?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so they're adding in electrons. Okay, and then you mentioned some of the NT factor stuff, and that's just really all of these phospholipids, right? The phosphatidylcholine.
Yeah, sometimes they'll throw in, and I'm not 100% sure behind the reasoning, they'll throw in some probiotics like lactobacillus.
Right.
The primary components are those phospholipids.
Got it. So just to break it down for the listeners, we got like our glutathione precursors, right? NAC, or maybe even liposomal glutathione, and the sulfur amino acids. We have the SOD. We have, glutathione and L-carnitine, but also these good fat-soluble compounds to help build that cell membrane up too.
Exactly. And then I tell people, obviously avoiding exposures as much as you can to toxic metals, but detoxing metals that you already have. And I tell people, it's kind of like, I never test anyone for leaky gut, because by the time you pay for the test, you could have just treated it.
Yep, I agree.
And statistically, most people are going to have some degree of it, at some point throughout the year. So I recommend even clients without any symptoms that once or twice a year, they do a gut maintenance protocol. And so, the MTHFR, the glutathione, those things, we can talk about those if you want to go into those now.
Yeah.
The epigenetic type stuff, I can give a brief overview of that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about the MTHFR, because we know MTHFR is this specific SNP that's involved in metabolizing folate, or if you're taking crappy supplements, folic acid to folate to activated MTHF folate. So we know that's really important because methylation has a lot to do with our genes, detox, energy production. And also I want to add that if you're eating conventional food, especially refined grains that are fortified in folic acid, well, and if you're one of these 50% of the population, you're going to be converting this folic acid into dangerous potentially cancer-causing metabolites. So can you talk about what the MTHFR is, why it's important, and then what does this actually mean to the everyday person?
Yeah, so MTHFR stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. It's an enzyme. So anytime, a molecule ends in ASE, that tells us it's an enzyme.
Yep.
So it's the enzyme that essentially converts folic acid into methylfolate, which is the activated, usable form by our cells. It's a SNP, meaning a single nucleotide polymorphism.
Got it.
Mutation would be like Down syndrome, trisomy 21. SNP means that within our DNA we have 4 letters, A, T, C, and G.
Right.
A binds to T, C binds to G.
Yep.
If our body happens to put down the wrong letter in the wrong place, that's known as a SNP. And since all of our genes code for enzymes, it's going to affect the function of that enzyme. Doesn't mean it's completely dysfunctional, and it depends on which SNP we're talking about. But for example, MTHFR, one copy usually reduces its function by about 30%. Copies reduces function by about 65, maybe 70%. So you still will process some folic acid, but you have a lot building up in the bloodstream, and that's been shown to lower your natural killer cells. So it can predispose you to cancer and other immune disorders. There's actually a test you can do for that. But the MTHFR itself, it's actually not one reaction. It's over 100 and something reactions. It takes place billions of times per second in every cell in the body. Some of the things it's responsible for include the production of glutathione,
right?
Is a detox molecule, an antioxidant. It helps with immune function, gut health, thyroid health, and it helps protect the mitochondria. And it also is responsible for certain neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. So you can have neurotransmitter imbalances or mood issues that are affected by methylation. So, that can definitely be impacted as well.
It's amazing.
Myelin, coating around our nerves, is produced during methylation.
Right.
So if we're not methylating, then that's affected. And our just overall detox capabilities are affected as well.
So detox, energy production, immune function, a lot of different things. And it's interesting because all methylation is just basically adding a carbon and 3 hydrogens onto whatever process is happening, correct?
Right, exactly. One carbon atom with 3 hydrogen atoms attached, And, we can methylate different substrates in the body. We can methylate hormones like estrogen to help them get excreted through the bowels. We can methylate neurotransmitters and different substrates. But methylation as a whole is in part responsible for gene silencing. Mm-hmm. So, if you have enough methyl groups there around your DNA, it quote-unquote turns off the bad genes, turns on the good genes. So but genes that we want turned on are things like tumor suppressor genes, so we don't get cancer. But if we're not methylating well, it can lead to those genes being active, or not being active in this case. So there's many other SNPs that factor into these pathways. There's thousands and thousands, and I try not to get bogged down in the minutia. The take-home message is that, we're giving you information about potential hiccups in your biochemistry,
right,
ways to bypass them either through nutrition or supplementation or exercise or lifestyle changes. And, you're not stuck with that biochemistry if it is aberrant, but, it can also lead us into directions for further testing. So, just because someone has MTHFR C677T
right.
doesn't necessarily mean they have high homocysteine.
Right.
They can have normal homocysteine. So that gets into whether the genes or SNPs are expressing or not.
Okay, so just to kind of break things down, we have this MTHFR, this enzyme that's really important at taking folic acid down into this activated folate form. Now, how important is taking or consuming B12 along with this activated folate? There's something
Great question. You need all the B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B7.
Right.
That's the folate and B12.
Yeah.
Generally, the way I layer them in is I start with minerals because magnesium and zinc are also cofactors.
Yep.
Then I layer in B1, B2, B3, those types of vitamins.
Yep.
Then I layer in lithium orotate because lithium orotate as a trace mineral is needed to transport B12 from the plasma or the serum into the red blood cells. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, and it's also very protective for the brain. Then the next step would be B12, and then finally methylfolate. As far as B12, some of your other polymorphisms may play a role in determining or deciding on which form is best for you. Mm-hmm. Methylcobalamin is definitely an active form. But if you have certain other polymorphisms like the COMT, which we won't talk about too much, but if you have that COMT, you may not tolerate a lot of methylcobalamin. So I typically start those people on adenosylcobalamin, which, is not as well known or not seen around as much, but it's an active form. It actively supports the mitochondria, and it does so without donating too many methyl groups. Mm-hmm. But if someone doesn't have COMT, it's perfectly fine to use methyl B12 with the methylfolate. And even some people with COMT, if it's not expressing, then they can tolerate methyl B12. But you run the risk of, when you over-methylate someone, anxiety attacks, palpitations, things like that.
Got it. Yeah, one of the supports that I typically do with patients is, one, they're on a really good high-quality multi with activated folate in there, the good high-quality B12 as well. And then we run organic acid tests, and we'll look at FIGLU or 4-aminoglutamate. We'll look at methylmalonic acid, and depending where they're at, we'll add in typically a sublingual high-quality B12, typically with methyl, hydroxyl, and adenosyl combined with the folate. What's your take on that with adding the hydroxyl in there? I don't think you mentioned that one.
Yeah, the hydroxy B12 is good. It's not an active form, but it is a form that helps scavenge nitric oxide, which one thing I didn't mention before is that if you have a lot of oxidative stress and you give that person B12 and methylfolate, you produce peroxynitrite, which is a harmful compound you don't want to do. So that's one reason why some people start producing or feel worse when they start taking methylfolate and B12. But the hydroxy can be good for scavenging the nitric oxide pathway, and it may help somewhat with energy, but the adenosyl and methyl are typically the ones, more closely associated with increasing energy production.
That's great. And can you just talk about that methyl trapping? So we need that B12 for that folate metabolism. If not, the folate pulls up, right? And we call that methyl trapping. Are you familiar with that concept?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, in a deficiency in any of the substrates really in the pathway will halt the cycle from moving, but especially B12, you have methylfolate groups sitting there waiting to be paired, with another methyl group or B12 group, and B12 is in short supply, or you're taking too much methylfolate in relationship to B12, then, that produces a problem. Mm-hmm. So, you need both of them for sure, along with the other cofactors, that are all important. And, I think that pretty much kind of sums up the generalities of the methylation cycle.
That's great. And then you were trying to avoid the cyanocobalamin, right? Yeah.
I mean, that one is not an activated form. It can convert into some toxic compounds. It's really, from my perspective, there's really no need to use it unless you're just cheap. So I try to tell people, adenosine, methyl, and hydroxy are the ones that you want to look at and go after. But the other things to consider with methylation is that even if you're on all these methylated B vitamins and the cofactors, if there's too much lead in your body, too much oxidative stress, those things inhibit methylation. Mm-hmm. So even if you're taking those supplements, your methylation cycle could still be inhibited. Mm-hmm. And the most accurate test we have out there for looking at the functionality of the methylation cycle is from Health Diagnostics Research Institute in Germany. Mm-hmm. It's quite expensive, I think around $400, but it looks at red blood cell levels of all the metabolites. It looks at oxidized versus reduced glutathione, SAM, which is S-adenosylmethionine, SAW, S-adenosylhomocysteine, and that's the most elaborate test. Doctor's Data offers a functional methylation test, but it only gives you about half that many markers.
I see. And then do you do an organic acid test as well?
Yeah, I do. Sometimes people come to me with them. Sometimes I order them. But, yeah, those can be very helpful, too, in looking at mitochondrial dysfunction or mitochondrial blocks and, neurotransmitter imbalances as well as GI dysfunction.
Mm-hmm. And just for the listeners, organic acids are nothing more than like the metabolic exhaust of all these various systems of the body, whether it's B vitamins or fatty acids or dysbiosis, like Doc said, fungus, neurotransmitter. So it gives us another window, because if we have a 23andMe, which is like, this genetic blueprint, which is there, but then we can look at how it's actually functioning in a dynamic type of environment with low nutrients or stress or toxins. We can see how that changes.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. So, wow, this is great, because I find a lot of people touch upon methylation, but it's very superficial. And I think you did a great job, Doc, digging into the individual parts of it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. And you talked about heavy metals affecting the whole methylation procedure. And we know heavy metals are, lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, etc., aluminum. So how do you test heavy metals in your office?
Well, the provocation test, is the most accurate, but I get a lot of people who are so sensitive and so toxic that I know if I do the provocation test, it's going to knock them for a loop, because I've seen people get, pretty sick from it because their detox pathways are closed down, and they pull all these metals out of the tissue, and then the metals really have nowhere to go, so instead of detoxifying, you're retoxifying.
Right.
So what I try to do first is work on gut health. When we talk about detoxification, we hear about phase 1 and phase 2, and those are certainly important, but there's also phase 3, which is transport out of the body with oat, C-moat, different organic transporters. Right. And if there's gut inflammation or dysbiosis, that blocks metals from being detoxed through the stool, which most people don't know that most of your heavy metals should, in a healthy body, come through the stool. When there's inflammation or dysbiosis in the gut, it shifts the stress to the kidneys. So then the kidneys have to do all the filtering of the metals. And it also, when phase 3 is shut down, it turns around and slows down phase 2. And then you have a big mess because the compounds coming out of phase 1 are highly reactive. They're more reactive than when you started the process. And so you have all these highly reactive compounds just sitting around ready to damage tissue, ready to damage organs, and just create mayhem within the cell.
Right, and I know this is kind of a controversial topic, but we see it with some patients with vaccine issues, especially the aluminum, is that if someone hasn't had their gut formed in that first 6 months to a year and it's still somewhat leaky, and we're removing such a significant percent of maybe these metals via the gut and the digestive tract, and it's not fully formed, this could potentially cause some reabsorption of these metals?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when if methylation's not open, glucuronidation, which is another phase 2 reaction, acetylation, if your glutathione levels are low and you just kind of pull out the metals with these chelating agents, you're not sure where they're going to go. And mercury is lipophilic, so it likes to get into the brain.
Yeah.
It's hard to get out of there. I've been off and on using the Dr. Chris Shade protocol the past few years where, he starts with the gut and binds metals in the gut, and then he has a proprietary blend of herbs and nutrients that support phase 1 and phase 2 detox, along with vitamin C and liposomal glutathione. So that's kind of the way I go about it. And I also tell people that, one way of simply detoxing metals is replenishing all your good minerals.
Right.
Because metals like mercury bind to the same enzyme sites like zinc. So if you take zinc and you react to it, you're probably not reacting to the zinc, maybe you're reacting to the mercury you kicked off.
Right, and also selenium's a big one too with mercury as well, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. So selenium is important for thyroid health. It helps in the production of glutathione. It helps, detoxifying mercury, aluminum, etc. With aluminum, Dr. Chris Exley, I think he's at Oxford, he recommends orthosalicylic acid, which he recommends in mineral water form.
Right.
But you can also get it in a form called Biosil, and that's supposed to help lower your aluminum levels. But what people don't understand a lot of times about metals is that, the study may come out, or you may hear on the 6 o'clock news, this level of mercury is perfectly safe. But how many people actually have just that level of mercury? Hardly any. And then when you look at that on top of the other metals they have, 1 + 1 = 10. So they're very synergistic, and people don't realize that these trace amounts that they think are safe are not actually trace amounts.
Right. Right, and there's also that whole idea of the lethal dose. So how that works is, imagine you have 100 rats. They increase the level of mercury that it takes to just kill 1 out of the 100, so 1% die. And then they do that same thing with lead, and they find the amount that it takes to kill 1%, so 1 out of the 100, so 1 dies. But then when you gave the 100 new rats the 1% dose of the mercury and the 1% dose of the lead, it killed all of them.
Right.
All 100.
Right. Exactly. So, that's what I tell people, one, let's try to optimize your methylation and glutathione levels, because we can't let you live in a bubble. 2, a couple times a year, it may be worth doing a few rounds of chelation or certain products that support phase 1 and phase 2. One thing that confused me earlier on in my career was that I would see people who had high heavy metal levels, and they would go in for IV therapy, and their levels wouldn't drop. And I figured out that it was most likely 2 things: inflammation that was inhibiting the detox process, that's probably the main one, is inflammation inhibiting the detox process.
Right.
But, if you have a lot of inflammation going on, no matter whether it's coming from a gut issue or a systemic viral issue, that inflammation can really inhibit the detox process. And the other thing is, if there's inflammation, the second factor is if there's inflammation in the gut, like we talked about with phase 3, that can decrease your ability to detoxify metals.
Ah, I see.
So people don't realize that the gut is really important in terms of detoxing metals.
And is it possible that there was just a lot more metals than you first got a window into on the first challenge test? Is that possible scenario?
Yeah, it's possible, but I've seen people, do multiple tests and multiple rounds, and, you would think, oh, wow, if anything's going to get rid of it, it's going to be this powerful IV.
Right.
But I have a lady that her levels of mercury and lead were really high, and she did 3 months of the Quicksilver Scientific products, and they're down to about just 10% of what they were.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I take a very similar approach. I don't touch metals until the gut is fully working because of the reabsorption that can happen. And typically I use a combination of the minerals, DMPS, and also binders like citrus pectin or pectosol or algae and such. So then you get the binders, you get the minerals, and then you get a little bit of chelation compound. But again, I always, because I've had mentors in the past, Dr. Michael Leibowitz, a couple others that have gotten incredibly sick where they got disabled because of doing chelation therapy. So it's something you want to work with a functional medicine doctor like Tim on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, metals, we forget, how much dysfunction and mayhem they can cause inside the cell. And, there's homeopathic ways to detoxify them. I haven't used many of those, but I mainly use nutrients that support, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and optimizing gut health, obviously, and then replenishing your magnesium, your zinc, your selenium, your iodine, all of those, keeping your detox pathways going.
That's great. That's good. And the test that you recommended, again, was that the test by Quicksilver? Was that the porphyrin test?
Quicksilver offers what's called a mercury speciation test, where they look at ethyl mercury, methyl mercury, and I forget the third one. Mm-hmm. And they test blood, urine, and hair, I believe, and they compare the three.
Yeah.
So I don't think they really look at any other metals. I think it's primarily mercury.
Yeah.
The provocation test, Doctor's Data has one. Yep. And, it looks at all the metals, so aluminum, lead, arsenic, tin, mercury, all those things, and can give you an idea. There are people who use hair mineral analysis, which I'm not an expert on, but, I think it can be good to show some ratios, but I do know I've seen studies where kids on the autism spectrum, we know their total body burden of mercury is high, but their hair level is low, so that means they're not excreting it.
Yeah, I've seen that before. They had that study back in the early 2000s, and I know the conventional medicine community came out and said, hey, look, mercury is not a problem. Mercury isn't an issue, and they kind of use that as to say that these metals aren't really driving any autistic-like symptoms, but we know that part of having hair and pushing metals out in the hair is a means of detoxification, so it kind of fits in because if you can't detoxify, you may not push it out in the hair. And I think when Dr. Boyd Haley repeated that study, they tried doing it via challenge tests, like we talked about, and they saw the metals were through the roof on that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, they set the studies up to kind of, cherry pick the ones that support their arguments. But, I mean, it's only common sense that, mercury, especially in kids whose blood-brain barrier and nervous system isn't fully developed yet, is damaging. And then, people say, oh, well, they took out the thimerosal.
Thimerosal, yeah.
Yeah. But the bottom line is they added in aluminum. Yeah. Aluminum has been connected to Alzheimer's, cognitive impairment, immune suppression, a lot of different things. So I'm not really sure that the aluminum is any better.
Yeah, and I'll go out there to say that taking a hepatitis B vaccine, which is the first vaccine given within the couple hours of living or life for the baby, it's a total useless vaccine for anyone in a first world country. The vaccine policies from hepatitis B, they all came from third world countries where there was poverty and drugs and prostitution. And any woman that's pregnant, they're already having full spectrum STD panels before they even get pregnant or while they're pregnant. So to give your baby a Hep B vaccination for basically a sexually transmitted disease is pretty useless, and it's just coming within that first couple hours of birth, and it can really put a big stress on the body. So if you're going to look at anything, definitely look at that Hep B vaccine.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And it can be, it's a threshold concept.
Yeah.
So, you can have gut infection, you can have some systemic viral issues, you can have a methylation deficiency, and then that vaccine is the last stressor that kind of puts you over from subclinical to clinical, where, before you were functioning, you had these stressors that you probably weren't aware of, and then this last one kind of puts you over the edge.
Yeah, I think what you said is you're looking at like the MTHFR, you're looking at COMT, you're looking at the mother's toxic burden, you're looking at their gut health as well, and you got to look at everything in conjunction. You can't just look at one factor like a vaccine or one factor. You got to look at everything in conjunction before you make that decision.
Right, exactly. And it's all about timing. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, I tell people it's kind of like dating. It's all about timing.
Right.
People need supplements. It's not that they don't need certain supplements, but it's all about the timing and the dosage and the combination, when it's taken, et cetera. Because, if we just went in, if someone's having a bowel movement once a week and we gave them IV chelation, they're going to get really sick.
Right.
Because they're just redistributing and retoxifying the metals in their body, and that's obviously not good. And, like I said before, too, the gut health is just so important, because if there's stress in the larger small intestines, then the workload is kind of shifted to the kidneys, and that's one reason why you see such abnormal glomerular filtration rates and things like that these days.
Right. That makes so much sense. So, Doc, would you agree that the genetics loads the gun and the environment pulls the trigger?
Yeah, I absolutely would. And some of the research I've read, and I'm not really sure how they figured this out, because it's been a while since I've read it, but PTSD is one example of where methylated genes got turned off, or, the methylation reactions were undone or prohibited, and that can last up to 4 generations. So even though you're not passing on necessarily a physical SNP all the time, the happenings of what you experience, whether it's poverty or rape or great depression, that can last up to 4 generations. So there's a transgenerational effect, and the genetics definitely loads the gun, and then the environment pulls the trigger. But what we also have to remember is that I read this study, I think, in 2012, and they looked at 8 or 9 different cities in the U.S., and the average umbilical cord had between 200 and 250 known carcinogens. So we have those known carcinogens on top of some viral infections that the mother probably had she didn't know she passed on, combined with vaccines, combined with the overuse of antibiotics, and then we wonder why kids are sick.
Wow. So we're going to just take this and we're going to go right into, I'm kind of emulating Dave Asprey and how he ends his podcast shows, and I'm going to ask that you can't say the exact same 3 things that you said on his show, but I want to take that kind of what we just talked about here and really bring it in, because people are like listening to this, they're probably like overwhelmed, like what the hell do I do now? So looking at all these things, what are the 3 most powerful things based on what we just talked about that someone can do right now that's actionable to help improve these items?
As far as just overall health or methylation specifically, or just?
Let's put it more towards methylation specifically.
Methylation specifically, one thing they can do is take a broad blend of antioxidants, anything from proanthocyanins, vitamin C, glutathione, boswellia, any of those antioxidants, because the more we can lower the oxidative stress, the better the methylation cycle will work. And we also want to lower it because we don't want to give B12 and methylfolate and have it produce peroxynitrite, which is a harmful compound. So starting with that, I would say would be the first thing for methylation. The second thing would be to correct your environment around you. So lower EMS, try to hardwire into your computer. Don't keep your phone in your pocket, or if you're a woman, don't keep it, near in your purse, or don't keep it in, your bra or anything like that. And try to keep all phones and electronics, away from your bed at night, and unplug the Wi-Fi at night. Make sure you're breathing clean air. You have your house tested for mold, because ultimately the SNPs technically aren't the problem, but this information that gets fed to them, whether it's from metals or viruses or mold, tells them to turn on or turn off. So if we can clean up the environment and the environmental signals that we send to the genes, then there'll be less quote-unquote bad genes being expressed.
That's great. So that was 1, 2, and 3, correct?
What's that? You went out for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you gave number 1, 2, and 3, right? We did 3 right there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I think it was like EMF, clean environment, and I think a lot of the high-quality activated beads as well in that first part, and the minerals.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. And then
Exactly.
one last question here. I've taken on this question I'm inspired from Mike Mutzel's podcast, High Intensity Health, but he ends by asking the interviewee here, if you were stuck on a desert island and you only could have one herb with you, what herb would you want with you?
Probably cordyceps.
Ah, well, it's kind of a mushroom, but yeah, I love cordyceps. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for energy, but it also has great effects on the immune function and overall endurance. I think rhodiola is also great, but I'm not sure how much of an effect it has on immune function. It probably has some, but I would say cordyceps.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Tim Jackson. And can you just give out here your info, Facebook, your website, where all of the listeners can find you at?
Yeah, my website is www.healyourbody.org. So www.healyourbody.org. My email is all lowercase, DRTIM, and then the number 072981 at gmail.com. So Dr. Tim 072981 at gmail.com. And Facebook, it's / Heal Your Body. It is my professional page on there.
That's great. And you're able to do Skype consults, so if people are even abroad or outside of the country or somewhere, outside of North Carolina where you're located, they can still work with you, right?
Absolutely, yes. I do distance consults. I have clients in, I think, 14 foreign countries and in every state now. So, don't let distance be a deterrent.
That's great. Awesome, Dr. Tim. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners here with before we go?
I think we covered a lot. I think hopefully, they took away the actionable tips and didn't overwhelm them. But if they have any questions, feel free to email me if something didn't make sense that I said. I'll be happy to answer.
That's great. And we're going to have full transcription of the podcast over here at justinhealth.com as well as Beyond Wellness Radio, which we'll just link over. So feel free. You can get the transcription and read it through. I'm going to read it through a couple of times because Dr. Tim dropped some serious knowledge bombs, and I'm looking forward to getting that fully assimilated.
Absolutely. That sounds great. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much, Dr. Tim. We appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com/question. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.